Alright, time for today's video. Protectionism and its results. Now we all know what tariffs are, right? Tariff just is a tax on trade. Now, they can get specific. For example, you can tax imports and exports differently. Like, for example, actually, before I give that example, it's good to acknowledge another thing. They can also be individual. So you can say for a specific type of good, like for example cloth, that you will tax it at a different rate than another. Like, say, water bottles. And so, combining these, it allows you to effectively control the cost of importing or exporting any good into a market. For example, let's use cloth as an example. So, cloth costs $5, let's say. Well, if you put a 20% export tariff on this cloth, that would mean $6 is the new cost of cloth for those who are importing it into their countries. Because first they have the $5 cloth, then they have to pay 20% of that to the government as a tariff, and thus it increases prices. This can go with imports too, and that's where protectionism comes in. Protectionism is the use of tariffs and other methods to defend or increase local industries. In this case, industry just means production. So, for example, if you have cotton plantations, that would still classify as an industry in this regard. Now, what does protectionism do? Well, it incentivizes local production by reducing competition. Thus, the result is, on average, lower quality, because the goal at that point is just to fill the gaps. And it's commonly used in certain types of modernization strategies, particularly import substitution strategies, and results in lower quality goods that still become, well, profitable because they're the only thing really able to compete because they don't have to pay the tariffs. It also reduces development because when you have free trade, you can effectively import what you need and export what you don't, and others can do the same. So economic development for both is grown from trade that is free. Now, I can understand people arguing, well, there are issues with that if, say, the economic policies of the two countries are different, and I would agree with that. Which is why I prefer to abolish most of those regulations, but, story for another time. There's also another thing. It reduces GDP. Well, to some extent. See, unbalanced trade, like what the US had when our industry was being exported over to China, looks as a lowering of exports and an increase in imports. Protectionist trade is a lowering of exports and a lowering of imports. Not exactly in the same proportions as the above, but still it occurs. And as a result, GDP can very well go down. This, combined with the lower quality of goods, can make things worse for many people, especially in terms of quality of life. However, there is a value in protectionism, and I say this for one specific reason. It's good for diplomatic bargaining. If you don't want to go to war with someone, but you still want something, how do you give them something to demand of you? Something they want? Well, you make them want something you have. For example, if they want your goods or want to sell you their goods, they want to sell you their goods while they also want your goods, then by raising tariffs, you can effectively force them to negotiate because, guess what? In order to trade efficiently, they need those tariffs gone. And if they want those goods, lowering the tariffs would allow them to do so. So as a diplomatic bargaining strategy, tariffs are very useful. So, good bargaining chip. That's it. It works as a bargaining chip. Beyond that, I would not recommend it. Actually, never mind. There is one other benefit, and this is going to be in the same vein as the bargaining chip. It can weaken others. Remember, you're getting weakened too, but it's essentially a war of attrition. If the US threw up 100% tariffs on every single good entering its market, would that hurt the US? Oh, absolutely. But it would also hurt everyone else trading with them. So if they wanted to bring all of their values down, all the GDPs, to reduce their power, it could do that and it would weaken them, allowing the US to pick them off while they're in a recession and weak. That is the other use, economic warfare. Otherwise, they don't really have much of a point, because there's far more profit in the development that comes from internal production that's a result of trade than there is from tariffs. Tariffs are not efficient in terms of productivity. Now, we as a country used it for a long time, but also we were largely running on a very, very small market and a very, very small expenditure list. A lot of people want to ignore this when they talk about tariffs, but in order for tariffs to pay for our government, you'd have to be able to pay off Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, our entire armed forces, and our interest with tariffs, at least. Not to mention the many, many other government agencies and programs that it runs. That ain't happening. So you reduce the taxes by lowering imports and exports, thus reducing GDP. You lower productivity and quality, thus reducing potential quality of life improvements coming from products. You reduce your economic development. You reduce GDP again. But you do gain a good bargaining chip, and you weaken others. So, that is the benefits and drawbacks of tariffs. Am I a supporter of them? In most cases, no. Would I use them against the Mao's rebellion to screw him over? Yes, I would. But those are just my observations. If you wish to go more in depth, feel free. And if you're interested, feel free to say. Have a good one.